So I know you as my 200-hour Kundalini yoga master teacher, one of the teachers that came in to do my 200-hour Kundalini training. That's how we got connected. And so tell us a little bit more of your background.
Sure. I was raised in the Catholic family, and um, and I guess from it seemed to I don't remember much about it until I got older, like 5 or 6, and at that point, my family changed from I don't know what to like really, it's like my stepmother was a convert, and I think when you get converts in the Catholic Church, they're just like everything by the book, right? And so that's the way it was in the family. And even before that, I was going to a Catholic school, so I'm I have been uh, fairly well indoctrinated in the Catholic faith to the point that in high school, I went to a seminary. I went to seminary prep school. And that was part because I was interested in, learning more about the faith and application of it, and partly to get away from home. Right. And plus, I think it's any devout Catholic's dream that their son would go into the priesthood. No, regardless, I mean, he could end up being a brain surgeon, but they would give that up, if he was to become a priest. And so that was also trying to please, and that's part of the dynamic that I see as well. But I only made it through the junior year. um, One, uh, I was attracted to having a girlfriend, and two, I don't know that it was that satisfying for me ideologically. And so I went home, finished out my senior year. I mean, like all through that time, like from 6th grade on, it's like altar boy city, and just staying, like doing like multiple masses on Sundays, and doing funerals and all that kind of stuff.
Was this in the time period of the Latin Mass?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were an
Yeah.
altar boy in the Latin Mass.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it was before all the new stuff hit. It was in um I graduated in 65, so it was like the early 60s. But um once I left home, I only went I only went back to church for weddings or funerals. But
Crossing your fingers when you cross that threshold that you don't catch on fire.
exactly. Exactly. And it was the vague unrest that I had, previously exiting the seminary, just intensified as I um I realized that, yeah, I could come, but I wasn't one of the peeps. I couldn't take communion, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. I was probably still going to hell, but I could go to church. And so I started looking elsewhere. I started reading stuff. I got caught up in um, reading some Edgar Casey's things, reading Krishnamurti, um, just looking into other avenues, until I found like 3HO and the Sikh faith years later, like in my late 20s, early 30s. And I took to that. It became home for me, and I resonated with the Sikh path because it was very non-judgmental and to some extent non-proselytizing. It wasn't until the Americans got a hold of the Sikh path, as far as American Sikhs, that you took could take a sniff and I could smell uh, you know getting other people involved in it. And I learned a lot. I did a lot of yoga, not as much as some people. I mean, some people went way overboard, but I did enough, and began teaching, or for I've been teaching a long time. Right now, probably 45 years, something like that. And it served me well. It got me, and this is funny, our contrast will come out with this, but I I did the physical stuff. I was more attracted to the physical yoga than I was the meditation. But as I practiced the physical yoga, it got me outside of the body, because, to hold some of these positions, like archer pose, Kundalini archer pose, or some of these Kriyas for long periods of time, you had to do something just out of self-defense. Like, get me out of here, get me out of the body, and let me see what's going on. So I discovered the etheric field, and even in the healing art, the Satnam Rasayan healing, I started picking up on the subtleties, and then I started enjoying meditating. And so I kind of switched the other way, until things came out like in 2020 with the whole exposure of Yogi Bhajan as maybe not being as holy as people wanted to take him for consistently. I think he tuned in, and he taught me how to tune in. He taught a lot of people how to tune in. But it's so funny, as over the last 4 years, as I started catching on to different aspects of pranayama and meditation and sound, mantra, gongs, guitar, bowls. I started realizing that there was a lot of stuff, the subtle points of this style of yoga, that people didn't really lay out for me, or I think people in general. It's like I'm finding that, yeah, when I was trying to learn how to do this stuff, I wasn't hearing the things that are coming to me now. And I assume that people must have had the experience, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't, or they didn't think it was important to share.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Like, what is coming? What is the subtleties that are coming to you now that maybe you didn't experience earlier? And
Oh,
is it also a stage of life?
it could be a stage of life, and it could be that. Let me back up a little bit. It's like, for a long time I was teaching, but I felt okay if I was teaching beginners. But if somebody happened to come into class that had been practicing as long or longer than me, I would just go, whoa, I don't know if I know as much as that person knows. And beginning in teaching is kind of like, okay, what do I know and what can I share? Until I started really tuning in and realizing that tuning in was opening up a channel for, like, Guru Dev or Creative Life to come in and say, okay, don't worry about it, just get into the space of shunya. And that was one of the things that I didn't feel like people shared to the extent that would have been helpful. How do you get into a 0 point field? And it wasn't until I started exploring and figuring out, or picking up a thread here or there, that space of shunya was just about neutrality and being non-judgmental, right? And that's what that's what I suppose Sikhism was supposed to be about, and yoga was supposed to be about. I mean, you can't get into yoga and make a bunch of judgments and say this is good and that's not good. I mean, you could, but you're not going to get the true essence of that union because, uh, and this comes into discoveries that, you know, I I do not believe that life, and I substitute life for God. You know, God has too many connotations that I don't necessarily find helpful, and so uh, I don't think life really has a problem with anything anyone does because everything that we do is leading us back to discovering that we are life expressing. And so,
So that's life with a capital L.
correct. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, as I'm discovering, that's who we are, you know, and it's inescapable. You know, it's like you check, see if someone's alive or dead or not, but are they breathing and do they have a heartbeat? And I look at it that the signal, the impulse to take a breath comes from life, and the heartbeat comes from life. It's like you can't stop your heart and start it again, and you know you can't stop breathing just by your own willpower. You know that stuff is you're programmed to take a breath and for your heart to beat. And so that that just started this search to, okay, how can I have a conscious relationship with life as a creation of the life, not necessarily as a human being, not trying to make God accessible, no, not trying to make God in my own image, but just trying to figure out, okay, what is life? What is it, and how can I have a relationship with it? Which means I have to uh, get an idea of the character, get an idea of the language, get an idea of the context, and then how do you put all that together and demonstrate it? And so, like one of my last aha moments was that um, in order to share the experience of life, it's not so much about telling people what it is or how to get there. It's maybe a little bit of that, but it's more of, do people feel life when they're in your presence or when they're interacting with you? And if they do, that's it. That's 99% of of um, the transmission of anything you could teach, anything, any leverage that you have with changing how life how the everyday life manifests. So it was like I went from Catholicism to Buddhism to this to that to kind of New Age Christianity with Elizabeth Clare Prophet and Edgar Casey and I don't know who else, to coming back to a relationship with the Christ light guiding my path to a conscious
So,
relationship with life.
so what I'm hearing from you is that even like life is a way of being.
Yeah.
And it's like when you say, you know, like that, when people can feel life and when you can impart that on your students or just the people around you, that life is, again, life with a capital L is kind of a way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a question for you. I know that the shunya, that 0 point is really important in where you and how you express yourself. And I'm curious as to, like, in terms of the 0 point field and Christ consciousness or Christ light, How do those two things in your experience interrelate? Are they one and the same? Do they work together?
Well, they work together, I think. The 0 point field allows for an individual to set aside the distractions, limitations, and the haziness of the identity. You know, we associate our identity of our name, what we do in the life, whether it's what we do for a living or part of my identity. Yeah, I teach yoga. I'm married. I live in Texas, and I'm susceptible to everything that's going on in Texas. But the 0 point field, uh, as we identify it, we come into like a realm that's closest to divine equilibrium. Now, the divine, even before everything came to be, was just this intense 0 point field with infinite potential and infinite power. And then in order to make a creation, it created this paradigm of electricity magnetically aligned that took the form of whatever divine mind wanted to see and experience, right? So it's like the field of life, or the cosmos, is life having an experience, but still maintaining its divine equilibrium in the subtlest field available. Or I don't know what it is, because human mind cannot even grasp it. And so what that space of shunya allows is to notice these two forces that create the wave of creation. And it's like we all have low periods, high periods, low periods, high periods. And but right across there is this level, not high and not low, which is that 0 point field. And so that fluctuation is points of light, just like pure energy, like a subatomic energy, and then we take atomic energy from that. But the dynamic of so many forms of life comes from the magnetic alignment of that electric energy. It's that whole thing. You rub the palms together and you can feel that light vibrating between the palms. And when you play with the distance, you can feel the magnetic attracting and repelling forces between your hands. Well, that's life in itself. And shunya is kind of allows us to neutralize our past experience and take that electromagnetic purity and relate to ourselves as consciousness within that ocean of life. And that's all I want to teach now. That's all I want to share with people now is, okay, and all of that, all of those particles of light contain life. It is life expressing from universal mind into what I would call divine mind, or life expressing in a way that we can recognize. Right? Universal mind, we have no idea even what it is. It's way beyond the little pea brain that's here in the little mind, that I've become accustomed to. So,
I really resonate with what you're talking about in terms of the 0 point field. I used the 0 point field quite a bit when I was healing from my divorce, because that relationship, as any, when relationships come apart, a lot of times it's not, you're so in the affective experience of that, like let go or be dragged. And it's like I got dragged through that. And I would go into meditation at that time in my life for probably like 2 years. And my whole intention in meditation was to bring this to zero. Just bring this into a place where there's not anger, there's not this, there's not that, of almost saying like it is what it is. Like I just want to bring all of this down to zero. And at that point I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I recognize in this conversation it's like it's coming away from the highs and the lows that you're talking about and bringing it into this point of like potential. It's like, what is the gift that is here? What is the lesson that is here? And can I move away from the affective experience into the 0 point where I can just be in this reality of it without being in suffering or being in, just in the really high, like negative affect, if that's
mm-hmm,
making sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what's fascinating about that time in my life is even like my outward appearance became like a very 0 point as well. Like it was this, and again, it was, this, it was also this time of, we're still in this like gender place where like this gender neutral, and it was like, and my outward appearance became this very neutral appearance as well, as and like it was so much of my focus was just coming into this like neutral 0 point, and it was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's the incremental experience of uh, finding your true nature. Finding that union. That 0 point field. And uh, it was experimenting with that and and investigating that sense of vibrating life magnetically aligned, now influenced by brain waves or thoughts. Thoughts produce the form that shifts with the change of electromagnetism, attracting and repelling, which we all do, but we don't know why, mostly, or we don't think about it. Electricity, magnetically aligned, influenced by what I believe and what I think about most of the time, as well as what I expect. Right. And so that's what sets the tone for the production of a life, for the production of the electromagnetic field. I used to think the electromagnetic field was started here and expanded however many feet you could manage to expand your electromagnetic field. But then I realized that no, it's like the macro field exists as the palette of creation multi-dimensionally, and each of us as consciousness has control of a finite portion of that macro field. And so it's that consciousness that creates the life by modulating the macro electromagnetic field that we're responsible for it. And it could be a small field, or it could be all the way to you don't even know what the extent of your creative abilities are. Especially when you realize that, mind doesn't operate in a straight line, and it's not necessarily confined by time and space, right? So it's like, holy smoke. When you think about that and the interaction of all of these individual life streams that have the ability to modulate electromagnetic energy just by thought, is like, that just makes me respect life even more, because life gets to deal with all of us crazies, not only on this planet, but across all of creation. And then you go, man, I was talking with a friend the other night. It's like, if somebody asks me something, my most honest answer is, I don't know. Because, we don't know what we don't know. And it's those things that we don't know that are probably the keys to life and liberation.
I like that you say that we're responsible for. We have that little piece of the whole magnetic field that we are responsible for, because I think that points back to the spiritual practice. And like
Mhm.
looking at, how powerful the yogas are, how powerful the pranayama is, how powerful the mantra is, because that is taking responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so at this point, I'm also interested in where you are, where your experience began to become coherent, and what brings you to your space now.
Well, I wasn't raised Catholic. My family, my dad was an altar boy in a Latin-based Catholic church as well. And I didn't have a lot of spiritual formation as a child. I had my first communion in the Catholic Church, and then we mysteriously never went back. I don't remember why. And I've recently since gone back to that parish because it's just right down the road for me. And that's been a really interesting and kind of fun homecoming in a way. So I didn't have a lot of a spiritual formation as a child. And I'm one of these people who's like, I've been always searching. I was reading Buddhism from a really young age. In hindsight, I feel like I became a yogi because I really wanted to become a monk, because those things within yoga that I just kind of find peace and power in are things like pranayama and chanting. I love mantra. I love sadhana. I love the group energy of it. The thing that brought me to yoga was really, I was in the military, and I was in substance abuse in a really big way. And I needed to find my way out of that. And a yoga practice was the first place in the world that I could breathe louder than my own thoughts. My life for a long time was like, why can't I just leave myself alone? Like I could not leave myself alone. And the yoga mat, at a certain point, I could breathe louder than my thoughts, and I was able to give myself a feeling of peace. Because up to that point, I'd never been able to walk into a church and feel the Holy Spirit or feel peaceful. And so yoga was the first thing, and it was probably in my late 20s. And at that point, it was a visceral bodily experience of feeling peace. And I had never felt that before. And so that turned me into, and at that point, I started doing yoga. I went into what I called my year of yoga, and I moved downtown to like Yoga Row, where there were all these yoga, studios. And I didn't allow myself any excuses. And I was going to yoga like 4 and 5 times a week, just to expand into that, feeling of peace. And then I took a Kundalini class in my teacher training, and I was late. I'll never forget this because I was late to that class on that day. And I walked in, and and I was like, what is going on here? I couldn't, there was something energetically happening that I was looking at from the outside in. And I was like, what is going on? And so after that, I almost at that point decided to go. I went straight in from a 200-hour hatha training with yoga right into the 200-hour Kundalini training the following like September. And I went
Wow.
and I just did back to back. And I'll tell you what, Kundalini messed me up. It did in the beginning. It messed me up. When we went through pranayama, that whole week in a pranayama, I came home and cried and cried and cried and cried, and I couldn't stop, and I didn't know why. And it just like what Kundalini yoga did to my energetic system is it really just seemed to expand like all of the things that were like all of the places in my chakra system that were unbalanced. And it just was like a huge like push of energy into all of that. And I went into a lot of like, I mean, a lot of affective experience, a lot of crying, a lot of, and thank God. But the Kundalini teachers, you and Matab and Xenia was a wonderful person to reach out to. It's like, because when I'd have these experiences, I could reach out and I would automatically get like affirmed on what I was experiencing, and things that I could actually do in practice that would help like mitigate the affectivity. And it was really a really profound experience, like just all around it Kundalini, and even like dipping into the Sikh practice and dipping into the Guru Granth Sahib and dipping into the mantras was such a sense of, I felt like I could help myself. Right. So it's like when I was experiencing something that was profound, is I used to have nightmares all the time. And I connected so much with the second mantra, the protective mantra in the Gure Jugad Gure Name. And I connected with that so deeply that when I was sleeping, when I would go into a nightmare, I would start to repeat that over and over, and my dream would change. And it's like, and it was such an empowering time to being able to take control of my inner experience that I had never experienced before. And and it just was, I mean, the breath work is so powerful, you know, down the line. So I mean, I took Kundalini training. I think I graduated in 2014. And then I got married and I got divorced. And it kind of was like I say that like I was married on an inhale and I was kind of divorced on an exhale. Like we served a purpose in each other's lives. And it was a very pivotal moment in me taking, it's like I ask people, because I work in recovery and as a yoga teacher, and I ask the people that I work in recovery with, like, when did you become a man? What does that mean for you to be a man? And when did you become a man? And I ask women, what does it mean for you to be a woman? And what is, you know, and when did you become a woman? And those responses are so very interesting. And I know that I became a woman when I got divorced, because what it meant for me was taking responsibility for my own emotional wounding, and moving toward a place where I could know that about myself, and thus respond instead of react when I am pushed or triggered or whatever you want that, you know, word to be. And that was really powerful. A lot of that happened with, again, mantra and breath, was like taking control of my responses once again. And you know, further down the line, so we got divorced in 2017, and in 2018, in a breath circle, shamanic breath circle, I had a mystical experience and was taken to the light of Christ. And that shifted everything for me. And I never thought I would go back to the Catholic Church, never, ever. And it's like right after that, there was something that was so powerful for me there that I went and got confirmed in the church, and started my master's studies in Christian spirituality, which allowed me to study a lot of contemplative Catholic saints, if you will, priests, nuns, that sort of thing. Saint Ignatius, Saint Teresa of Avila, who is who had a full Kundalini awakening, right? It's like she and her her studies and the way that they honor her is in this like full like body bliss, which is, and I'm like, I look at that, I'm like, that is exactly what that is. That's a Kundalini awakening. She's like in the field of ultimate creativity, and it's just letting all of that roll through her body. And it's been such an interesting purview to have the yogic lens on while still moving through something that is, the Catholic formation and the Catholic, the Catholic saints, and hearing the contemplative experiences of that. Like there's so many things that connect and as well as repel within these two lineages. What I find fascinating, and the thing that I'm reading that is just unbelievable, is Yogananda went through the Gospels of and has like I say reinterpret. I want to be careful with the word interpretation, but it's like has looked at the Gospels through the yogic lens, and that is, I mean, absolutely fascinating to hear about, the chakras and, all of that and what's happening in the resurrection, and using all of this like very Eastern language to describe something that, and it's really unbelievable. I know that you were also reading something that had to do with the Christ's letters.
Hmm.
And can you tell me more about that?
Yes. I think it was, I'm not sure of the year that this started to come about, but it was after the turn of the millennium, and so the book was well, Christ was channeled through this medium, through this writer, and it didn't happen all at once. It was like the Christ energy worked with this lady over a decade or more, just so she could become neutral and receptive, and essentially become enlightened, but still be here, in the earth in the third dimension. But probably she expanded beyond that, beyond the third dimension, and the process of her relationship. But no name is given. She's just known as Anonymous. And so the essence of the book is the Christ light communicating teachings that were his intention to share back in Judea in 0 or 32 or 30 BC, AD. And so he just goes through his experience of, is like all of his serious work started getting baptized by John. And as soon as he was baptized by John, he knew, like, whoa, there's some mojo going on here. He just went straight into the desert. And in that time in the desert, he discovered life. And he discovered, like, the truth of existence. He calls it the truth of existence, is that life exists, and that the consciousness and the beliefs influence what we create, but that the base field of all of life are these, he called them shimmering motes. It's like when you look into a sunlit room and you see all the little dust particles dancing in the sunlight, right? So you saw all of life like that, with shimmering motes, and he knew that they were magnetically aligned. And in the process of his time in the desert, he got the experience of seeing what life was, and realizing that it's possible to immerse oneself into the experience of realizing that divine mind is working through these shimmering subatomic particles, magnetically aligned, creating everything, and that everything that is created, and the nature of that life expressing was to provide nurturing and nutrition, protection, fulfillment of needs, inspiration, and to create essentially the expression of love in any circumstance. And that becomes corrupted by not understanding that that's the essence of life, and so we're blessed with this analytical mind, what we would call our human mind, that within this realm of infinite creativity gives us individuality, allows us to be individual, and that mind also is a tool for us to protect ourselves and also to get our needs met. And you can notice that, as with babies, they come in blank slate, and so they have their individuality at that point coming into the world like that. But then they figure out by interacting with their caregivers how to get protection and how to get their needs fulfilled. And that's all given to them by their caregivers. And so it's like we have this sense of passing down these patterns of asserting our individuality, feeling protected, getting our needs met by how we're taught. And there's this whole wide range across all civilizations and across all forms of life, but essentially all we care about really is this earth that we're on right now, except for people that want to conquer space, but we won't worry about them. And so he just shares what how life actually does that it's like within Catholicism you feel this this Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and they're assigned certain characteristics and roles. But he says essentially that life takes the form of the ultimate mother and father, and the mother and father perform a dance between magnetism. Magnetism is about pushing and pulling, about attracting and repelling. And the energy of electricity is more like the divine masculine, which is creative, outgoing, just get it done, sun energy, and warmth, just like in yoga. Okay, so the electricity essentially is Pingala. It's that outward expression, or let's say in the central nervous system, it's the sympathetic nervous system. On the other hand, the other end of the magnetic polarity is or that you have the electricity, then you have the magnetism, and the magnetism essentially provides purpose. So we all have energy, and we all have a purpose. The electric field is Divine Father. The purpose of the magnetic alignment of that field is Divine Mother. And so he just explains all this stuff, male, female roles, what the nature of the uh, analytical mind, or he calls it the egocentric mind, and how to relate all of this to divine mind and divine wisdom. And so the trick becomes, like you said, getting into the 0-point field and allowing all of the powerful experiences in our lives to every once in a while when we meditate, whether we're using sound or breath, you just find the 0-point field and take the charge out of our assignment of value to any experience and say, okay, let's just take it to zero and allow the soul in its pure connection with life to move through my collection of life experiences and become known to myself as identity. Okay, who am I? What is my identity? Identity has to relate back to the soul, but it has to go through all the experiences to get there in ultimate purity. We all catch glimpses of it, which it becomes our inspiration to go deeper into our practice or into our inner work. So reading this, it's like 9 letters, and each letter has a particular focus. And so somebody gifted me the book. I said, "Hey, what is that book?" He said, "Well, you take it and read it." And I go, "Really?" He says, yeah, just read it." And so I read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, and now I just go. I just pick whatever letter and going through it again. And it made so much sense to me. It allowed yoga to make sense to me, gave yoga a purpose. And I too, just wanted to get out of the vicious cycle of uh, recreational substances. Mostly just smoking pot, with a few excursions beyond that. But I just help me make sense out of life and help me figure out who I am, rather than someone that gets high and jibber jabbers and eats his head off and then comes down and becomes, this closed thing, and then gets high and opens up, all of that kind of stuff. And, but that reading what he had to say, or what that light had to share from a very exalted space. He was exalted when he was just trying to tell people what life was. And that's what I realized, that you have to recognize what you don't know, and recognize the stuff that you do know you really don't. Because everything we experience, we're basing it on it's based on our past experience, which was corrupted just by the way we were taught. And some of us were really lucky to have, less corrupted teachers, and other people were, blessed with having very corrupt teachers where they could see that this is not working. But they're just a little bit corrupt. You believe them because, it's not so far-fetched.
I have a
But
question for you.
yeah, yeah.
Knowing that we both come from this place of substance and things like that, and when we look at, like, when I look at Catholicism, and then when I look at yoga, and they both have a very they're both very centered in purity, right? In different ways, right? Like the yogic path is about like pure prana, if you will, clearing out your diet. There's a lot of different cleansing activities to clean and clear the body. And on the other side, Catholicism also it has a desire for purity, but it can almost be perceived in a very negative way, where it idolizes the Virgin, and and if you are not that, then you're unclean, and so there's this aspect of purity that seems to be important, whether it is bastardized or not, in both lineages. And so I'm curious, and to the way that you experience life and divine life, and what is what is your feeling of purity in creating a divine life?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I split off from Catholicism, because it was like, or even most brands of Christianity is like, yeah, you're supposed to be perfect, but I'm sorry, you're a sinner, right? And with the path to redemption is like, I don't know what. And so um, I I don't even, I kind of downplay the overt aspect of trying to become pure with I think that the key to that is just the direction by the Christ and various teachers is just be true. Just tell the truth in any given situation, and that and the ultimate situation where you use that truth is your relationship with life, and you say, okay, this is my experience. If I was going to outline what I think about my life, and in this moment, I would go, well, this, and this sucks. This sucks even more. This sucks a little bit less. This is a good part. This is a really good part. But in my communication with life, I just have to say, this is where I am, not to let divine life know where I am, but to let myself know where I am. Because essentially, it's like a lot of what I do boils down to this meditative prayer that's shared in the book, and the giving the nature of life and our relationship to it, is that divine life being within the all the particles of light that make up my electromagnetic field, that eventually come down to lower frequencies where my body manifests in denser frequencies. It's like um, that divine life already knows what I'm thinking, already knows what I need, already knows everything about my situation, uh, multiplied by infinite streams of light. But uh, I don't recognize that. And I don't recognize that life is always communicating with me, sending me what I need. And so I pray, and I think the most sincere prayer is just going, if you're in a situation where it sucks, you go, Mother, Father, life just sucks. I'm just really at my wit's end. If this gets any more fucked up, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right? And so
Yeah.
the next step is like, what can I gain out of this? What wisdom can I gain so that I get out of this heavy, muddy space? And so to me, for the yogini and yogis, learn the language of divine life, just which is like the gurus would say, it's a realm of intuitive poise. Intuition, which is not analytical, but it just comes in of its own nature, like pure mind, that you don't have to know anything. In fact, the less you know, the better it works. And engaging that within a sense of poise, which I see as shunya. Shunya is poise, and allowing the connection of myself as awareness in a state of poise to divine life. It's like there comes this communication and interchange of knowledge, and it's kind of like, that's why pranayama is so powerful, in that it is divine cosmic energy coming from beyond the beyond. It's like pavana 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 pada para. Pada para is beyond the beyond, is where prana comes from. And so it's coming from the other side of the electromagnetic field into my awareness, and becoming embodied into my cellular matrix. And so that prana is essentially divine life coming into me, bringing me a nurturing sense, nutrition, uh, and information. And at the same time it does that, it's circulating through my cellular matrix to find cellular matrix and emotional and mental realms and electromagnetic realms, to find that which no longer serves me. And as I give permission, the prana becomes upana, moves back across the subatomic field into the subtle realms, and divine life can absorb whatever I agree to give back. Most of us are going, hey, it's my experience. I'm a survivor. By God, I'm going to keep that because it's my badge of honor. Whereas the yogi would say, yeah, I went through that, and it came from you as information that was interpreted by my corrupt mind. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I mean, that's just one tool that I use as consciousness, and recognizing that beyond time and space, I occupy all dimensions at the same time. So my crystalline, essential, liberated self is just hanging out in that dimension while I sort out the lower dimensions. And so it's possible for me to give that back to life and say, you take care of it. Isn't that the way it goes? You know, it's like we're wrestling with our devils and demons, and we're doing the best we can with the gifts we have at our disposal and the state of our mind is in, until we just go, I can't do this anymore. I can't handle it anymore. And you have the dark night of the soul. And one of the aspects of the dark night of the soul is just giving up and calling on your light, or the Guru Dev or life itself, and say, okay, I give up. I'm done. And at that point, this portal opens that says, you sure? And do I have to say this again? I give up. Right. And then you find some release until you get caught up again in the machinations of the mind. So I forget what the question was, but that was to me, that's the dynamic of yoga, is just relying on life. And
Well,
yeah, I
you
don't.
said you hit me really hard with this prana apana idea, because the thing that I've never really considered in terms of like, life force coming in and like waste going out, is how we can almost hold on to the apana.
Oh
And so,
yes,
I'm kind of like, wow, like that's kind of good. So, and in that way, I mean, you speak right to it. My question was the idea of purity. Like
yeah,
where does purity come into all of this? And so like holding on to the waste, right, which is the apana, right? And that surely is an impure practice if you wanted to put it in that, like in that wording. And something else that I like that you said as you started talking about the dark night of the soul, and in the Catholic side of things, Saint John of the Cross talks quite a bit about the dark night of the soul. And something else that Saint John of the Cross talks about is, so was when I think of purity, I think in a similar way that you don't like to use the word God, you like to use the word life. I don't like to use the word purity because it comes with so much baggage. And so the thing that I've kind of turned away from purity and moved more toward mastery is that like feels better. And one of the things that, St. John of the Cross talks about is he wants to talk about the ways that we use discernment and the ways that we overcome our bodily sensations, the way that we want to, where we have to stop living from what feels good to more of something of what is good. And we have to master our body, and we have to master our senses. And I think that the yogic way does just that, right? In order to move into the zero field, I have to come into a space, like I have to let go of my thoughts, right? In order to receive divine light, I have to get out of my own way. I can't be sitting on my meditation cushion thinking about what somebody did to me and going through my whole like, oh, and this bitch, and like this. That's not a place for me to actually receive divine light. And that's where the yogic practices come in, because it becomes, for me, it has become a mastery where I can think thoughts, and I can also say, okay, now is not a time for thinking. Like let's let the mind calm down. And that's where the breath comes in. The breath comes in, and when the breath deepens, the mind gets quiet. And when the mind gets quiet, the zero field is more accessible. And when the zero field is more accessible, that, divine light, the spirit can come through, and the spirit can then become, can speak. And so the purity, I let go of purity in a way so that we can talk about, and that's what's so powerful about the yoga practice, is it's a practice. So we have these tools at our disposal to be able to use. My cats are going crazy over here. They're real excited about what I'm talking about, apparently. But we have these yogic tools that we can use to then access these more subtle fields. And that to me is the wholeness of the divine life, is being able to access and to have the daily practices and the readings that then are teaching us something into, like, deepening into the divine life. Now,
Hmm.
a question to you about or actually, it's not a question, it's more of a request, just to bring things back to the workshop that we have that's coming up that on September 22nd, Sunday, September 22nd at Blue Heart here in San Antonio. The Pavan, we're in full cat fight mode over here. Sorry about that. Boys, hey, the Pavan meditation, can I request that? Is that, can I
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah, definitely.
You
Um,
are so intricately linked into that meditation because I listen to a version of that mantra quite often, and I have such a like really distinct memory of you like on your guitar taking us through that particular mantra that I
mhm.
think just as a throwback to even this conversation in September, like talking about the breath and talking about that intake of prana and on all that resides in the prana, I would just love to do that meditation.
Yeah, yeah, I'll make a note of that. And or it's like with it's like that sheet that I sent over, workshop outline and content. Uh, both of us, as we remember, were right in that Puvan meditation or Brahmana meditation, and that was like really key for me. That meditation was a springboard into it was like I don't know if you can call it first, second, third layer, but it was the layer that, okay, beyond the beyond and prana and apana um, and just the whole idea of the qualities of that meditation, to become fearless and to um, just find that the power of prana was significant, fundamental. So yeah, we'll do that. And but just the thing about investigating and working with the Christ letters in terms of orienting uh, my practice and how I share what I discover with it, um, um, the the real benefit from that comes from directly reading, and actually not just reading, but reading contemplatively and just really getting into the spirit of what's being communicated, and not so much attached to the words, although the words are signposts that lead you along the investigation. But and I lost why I was saying that. But yeah, I don't know. It'll come back, and that's the thing with this, with working within the letters, is that I can interpret something as a certain way, but that's just part of my corrupted perception
Mhm.
that's a little less corrupted than where I was before. Does, if that makes sense. Uh, but anyway, it's like that prayer is just a beautiful prayer. It took me uh, months to commit it to memory where it becomes automatic. But um, just just oh yeah, purity. That Okay, so my interpretation of that is the soul is always and ever connected to life. It's like it's life's light that is reflected by the soul, moves through the soul, is trying to make its way to my consciousness. And like I said, in between is the sheath of the personality and the collection of my experiences, which I perceive to own. But the the purity exists nonetheless. It's like that's why it's like Om Mani Padme Hum is like the jewel rests within the lotus, it sits within the lotus. So the soul exists within the flower, the lotus of the heart. And it's like that light's always shining. And the idea is with yoga meditation, 0 point field, is to reduce the distraction. And it's like the voice of life and the voice of spirit and the voice of the soul, as it were, is like the mother that never yells, but is always, the instructions are in a soft voice. And as long as the child's freaking out, it has this notion whatever is being said right now is really important, but I have to vent. And so you don't get the message right away. But it's that it there's a difference between instruction that's given in a loud, authoritative voice and instruction that's given in that subtle uh, voice of wisdom. And so the idea is I want to hear the voice of the Divine Mother and the Divine Father. In order to do that, like you said, I have to get the mind to shut up, have to get the emotions to simmer down. And uh and it's a trick, but it can be taught, like pretty easily, really, especially now. And that's the other thing with this workshop is that I don't know if I mentioned this to you or someone else, but it's kind of like, yeah, I don't feel like I need to engage in all the heavy duty uh, Navi Kriyas and this Kriya and that Kriya, and just wear myself out because the the that veil between the soul and my personality, or the veil between spirit and this third dimensional realm, is getting really thin. So now it's a time to refine and just not feel like you have to attain anything, but just pay attention to who you are, because we know when we're going off the rails, right? We don't necessarily know how to stop that process, but we're learning. And that's the thing. And that's why I want to do this workshop, because it just takes this prayer, and it takes some breath, it takes some sound. you know Most of the movement I do now is spinal flexion, torso turns, and life nerve stretch. That's it. And then I'll do these little uh 3 exercise 3-minute kriyas every once in a while. But the idea is, hey, no, let's experience shunya. And I think if whoever can lead, or whoever can hold a space where people can discover that shunya, either for the first time or allow it to become deeper and deeper, is, uh, to me, that's the work right now. And that's what I want to share. Share it through music, share it through deepening that space, and just sitting together, because it becomes more and more real to us that we can't rely on legislation to make the life livable. We've been doing it for 200 years, and we realize, yeah, especially now, it's not going to happen. So we all have to discover that sweet spot individually, and then get together in pods and expand the power of that sweet spot. Because the more people that find shunya and intuitive poise together, increase exponentially its effect. And like I said, people know who you are by how you feel when they're with you.
Mhm.
And so that's the idea. If I had a selling point, that's it.
I mean, I'm right there with you in terms of spinal flexes, the twists and life nerve stretch like that. That's hilarious to me because that's my practice right there.
Yeah.
And I ask
Yeah.
myself in reflection all the time, I'm like, man, these longer kriyas and these bigger things, like, is it necessary? Do I need to like get myself into this? And I'm like, but right here, like all these, like, couple of things, these feel so good for like what I'm trying to achieve. And so I'm super excited to hear you say that because I'm right there with you.
Yeah. 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 And I'm excited too, because it means I'm not alone.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.